Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's podcast is part of our Agile Product Operating Model series. Today, we're going to discuss the recently published paper, Moving Beyond Agile Transformations, Leveraging the Agile Product Model. And I'm really lucky to have the author of the paper, Andy Brandt, PST, an organizational change guru, to talk about his motivations in writing the paper and really to really lean into what is the state of agile transformations. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Glad to be talking with you again about this topic, because we talked a lot also when we were working on the paper.
Yes, we did talk a lot, and let's hope we don't bore our listeners, because I'm sure we did talk for hours and hours about this. And you know, your experiences in the agile transformation world and how you saw those transformations really were really interesting, because very similar to what I'd seen in the US and the world with respect to that. So before we jump into the white paper, Andy, let's start with the landscape or context of agile transformations. So what's your take on the state of play on agile transformations? What's happening?
So I think that they are mostly a thing of the past. So whoever wanted to introduce Agile into their organizations, into their company, they have already done that. And I would say that this big wave was around 2017, maybe till 2021, maybe 22 for some companies. So, but if I encountered agile transformations underway in 2022, it was mostly something like a second take. So it's the second or third time we tried to do this, because the first time didn't go as well. We didn't get the results we wanted, so we are trying it again. But I would say that the agile transformations are largely done.
And what do you think in terms of the outcomes? I've seen lots of these agile transformations happen over the last 10 years, and I've got a feeling what the outcomes are in average. Obviously, there's outliers on both ends, but what do you see in terms of the success, the value that that organizations have got out of agile transformations?
So I think that they got quite a lot of value, because in many places these efforts succeeded in creating, for example, cross-functional teams. And there is just one memory just plugged into my mind about, that was like 15 years ago, or maybe, that was, I think, 2011. I was called to talk about Agile. That was 2011 in a large bank. And I don't remember much from that event. It was a very large event. There was a large auditorium in the HQ with like 200 people there. And there were two departments present, largely the Department of Software Engineering and Department of Quality Assurance. And as part of my talk, I was responding to questions from the audience, which were coming on small slips of paper. And I remember just one of those questions, and it was like this: I understand that now, with Agile, we'll have to work more closely with them, but will we have to also sit together with them? Okay, so, and this showed the depth of cultural divide between those two groups. Now it's unthinkable. That divide is largely gone. We don't have the totally separate departments of quality assurance and software development. That's one example of the change that happened. So we have more cohesive teams. And also, I feel that we concentrate so much on processes, on Scrum, etc. But I think there is also lots of improvement when it comes to the craftsmanship of building software. A lot of that has improved over the past 15 years or so. Part of that is thanks to tooling, but much of that is again thanks to efforts and also thanks to Agile. The sole thing that you have to have something done fairly often, and again, it's not so that all teams that say they do Scrum, they actually have something done every 2 weeks, which is the predominant sprint length, by the way. But still, they have something done more often than they had in the past. And that kind of forced improvements in craftsmanship. So I think there's lots of that. And also, we have created quite a lot of Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, whole departments of way of working. And I mean, again, some are saying that they are not as valuable, or maybe they shouldn't be there as departments or whatever. But basically, what we created a whole body of people who care about the process and about improvement and about getting better in the organizations, and they are still there in a sense, right? So those are those things that on average worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think 20 years ago, 15 years ago, delivering product and predominantly software, but delivering software product was incredibly hard. Delivering the process was incredibly complicated. We were talking about things like CMMI, we were talking about, Kokomo and things like that. And I think over this last 15 years, what I've seen is that delivery has definitely improved. Cross-functional teams, particularly with business analysis, testing, development, maybe UX, have kind of come together. Maybe UX, that's a whole nother debate, and are effectively doing work together, which would have been, I remember my first job, Andy, and you're a little bit younger than me, but you can probably attest to this. I built code. There was a whole different room where people tested it, and they weren't very nice people, actually. They just kept finding problems with my code, which I didn't particularly like. At least now they're focused and are working together, which is a huge thing. But I still see, and maybe you don't see this, but or maybe you do. In fact, I think this was the sort of premise of the paper. That there's still a lot of these teams are still working on work. They're not working on value. They're not aligned to innovation. There's a massive gulf between business strategy and technical delivery. They're sort of going they're going really effectively, but not necessarily in the right direction. They're building things that people don't want. They're taking an inordinate amount of time to do that. That has not changed because of agile transformations. Do you agree,
Yeah, I
Andy?
think it's slightly changed. It's slightly changed, but it changed. I wouldn't say it's not enough. What has changed? Because when I'm saying slightly changed, I have two things in mind. One is the companies, the organizations, or maybe parts of the larger organizations that you call the outliers, where the change really did run deep and was profound, but they are a minority. And I would like to make this. I would digress a bit, but I think it's normal. It's something to be expected. Um, when we change and when we introduce change, and maybe that's another article that I have on my mind. But when you change, when you introduce change, in the way we were doing with Scrum and Agile, we were trying and we were looking at the best companies and best teams and most productive teams and hyper productive teams, etc. Well, average teams are average. They cannot ever be hyper. Hyper was always a minority. So we couldn't hope, and no one can hope really, unless they take really drastic measures to really become from becoming low average to jump suddenly to being one of the top performing outliers. I'm not sure that I don't think it's even possible. But what is possible is moving from being a low performing average to higher performing average, what I call the 5% difference. But that 5% difference might be difference between going down and going slightly up. And That's a whole lot of difference. Um, so that was to a certain degree, to be expected. But the organizations did not get out, and I'm getting back to the main topic, they did not get out from the core problem that we all have, which is we are trying to do too much more than we are capable of. And I'm saying we all have it because it's a human problem. We have the same problem in our lives, that we're trying to grasp too much. But in our lives, there are kind of hard limits that we can see or even feel. And in a large organization, if you are an executive, a CEO, or someone of this kind, it's much easier to fall into that illusion that we can do everything, because almost no one will say no to you. And the end result of that is that you have, and it's an anti-pattern that I see repeatedly in organizations, that they have like 100 initiatives open, and how many people are working on those projects? Well, 25, right? I'm exaggerating slightly, but this is this kind of relationship. We have many projects, initiatives, all kinds of names for different types of work, and that work usually cuts across different technologies, different systems, and different teams. And one person that I talked to, one manager at the bank, he used this jar analogy. He said that our teams are like this jar that is full of sand, and there is no place to stick big stones. Where in big stones he meant products, and this leads to this problem that, so we have agile teams, we are delivering more often, we are better technically, we are better craftsmen. However, we don't have spectacular results. And how do you achieve spectacular results? Well, by focusing. You cannot be spectacular in everything. You have to focus on something. So if you boil that, if you kind of transfer that into an organization, I would say that teams have to be focused on products. And that's the biggest problem right now, that we don't have, I mean, that the whole work is not cut into products properly. And secondly, that those teams are not really focused on those products. And this is what we are trying to address with APOM, I think.
Hmm. It's interesting. You sort of highlighted something that I don't think is obvious when you think about moving to a product model, but it's something that Dow Fernandez, the ex-CIO delivery lead of some large financial institutions, when he was introducing product operating model or a product model to those organizations, he said the most important and most powerful thing that it gave him and his organization, his delivery organization, was the ability to say no. And which sounds incredibly negative, and you're like, my god, the last thing you want is something that can say no. But he said, because we said no, we said yes so much more. I was like, okay, now hang on, I'm now going around in circles. He goes, because we actually had a roadmap for our products, and the teams were aligned to those products, and they weren't continuously changing focus, and they weren't continuously context switching and connecting and dealing with dependencies, and everybody knew. It gave us the ability to do a lot more, but it gave us also the ability to not start a lot more at the time, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective, that is something that his agile teams, and obviously he was at Fidelity, who were the second or third company ever in the world to do Scrum, and I thought, I thought that was a really, really interesting point of view.
Yeah.
So, all right. So all right. So we've got this challenge. You've got agile transformations have happened or been happening, and maybe they're still happening in your organizations. Sometimes these things are big and long. So we're not judging here. We don't do any of that. But the value that you're getting, which is significant, could be so much more with this idea of APOM. So talk a little bit about the Agile Product Operating Model from your perspective.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's mostly, maybe I wouldn't say mostly, because as we worked on this model, and we are working on it right now, I see that there are different perspectives on that. But from my perspective, from where I see it, so to say, I would say that how to manage a product is an already solved problem. We already know how to do that. By saying we, I'm saying the community at large. And there are books about it. There are people who have experience in it. There are training courses on how to be a product owner, product manager, or however you call it, on different levels of competence. So we know that. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but there is this body of knowledge. However, the key problem seems to be that there are no real product owners really managing the products. And you said about context switching. We are kind of forced to context switch in a sense that we have to adjust our products to the changing market faster and faster and faster. So, for example, strategy now is something 2 years off and not 10 years off. But still, it's done better when there's someone who makes decisions quickly, but they are within the context of the product that they actually really own and don't do that alone. They own it with their team. And from time to time, that can change in a sense that this whole team and this whole team with the product owner maybe gets another product or starts towards something else if that product is not being developed anymore, or maybe it's not needed anymore. But still, it's a longer stretch, right? So we deal with instability, but being more stable. It's something like this no yes problem that you mentioned, or I will say that again. So yeah, we get stability, but we also deal with change better. And it's like this yes no paradox that you mentioned, right? Um, So, so I see it as a problem of how to get there. And how to get there is mostly how we convince people who are running those businesses, and they are running those businesses in the context of our socioeconomic system where they have to deliver profits and they have to be rising every year. Uh, how we convince them that the way to get there and to get those spectacular results they crave is to give more of the organizational power that they have in those teams to actually developing products. How to convince them that it's better to say no to many initiatives and say yes uh, to some well strategically chosen products. And again, because we had those agile transformations, because we have agile teams, this strategic commitment doesn't have to be long term. It can be, I don't know, for a quarter. And if after a quarter they feel a product makes no sense, or continued investment makes no sense, it's easy to switch to something else. So how to get them to view the organization not through the lens of ongoing work, projects, initiatives, but through the lens of, okay, we have products and we develop products. And of course, we have ongoing work as well, but at least some part of our power, which is manpower, which is capital, is devoted to developing products. And that's an organizational change problem. And again, as we are talking right now, it just occurred to me that this all happens at a crucial moment, because right now we are in the midst of artificial intelligence revolution, and I'm also very deep into that. And when it comes to software development, it's a revolutionary technology. It increases the effectiveness of teams, well, from 30 to 70%, depending on whom you ask. But having used those tools and using those tools myself, I see huge change over the last year, and it will just increase. Now, why I'm mentioning that? Because this is another kind of temptation for the managers. Okay, why bother with that? AI will do everything that I want. And no, even AI won't do all the initiatives and all the work that you do. That is this problem of having the jar with stones and sand, it won't go away. Yes, the jar will be bigger, but the problem itself won't go away. So while organizations will surely invest in this in that technology, and I'm very much for that, and I support that, and I will even be helping organizations do that, I still believe that they have to focus on well-selected product portfolio, and that's the main challenge. I mean, the main challenge is actually convincing the CEOs, CFOs, and other executives that this is the right way to go.
I think AI, it's really interesting you brought up AI. I agree that AI and this technology is, I mean, it's at the level of the printing press, in terms of its potential impact in society. I actually was using it yesterday. I'm not very good at accountancy and planning and forecasting and all that stuff, and so I took my data and I threw it in and asked it some questions, and I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it helped me make some decisions about uh, where certain products are going, etc. But the key to it is that context. And the problem that AI suffers from, and we've done a lot of experiments like you have, is if you give it a much broader context, then the value of the answers that it gives you and the solutions that it provides are less valuable. The great thing about this boundary that we're calling product is it's customers, stakeholders, value. It's a classical model, right? Of a context that makes sense, which then, providing that context and those boundaries, allows AI to do some amazing things to increase the power of the solutions it's creating. I think that's the alignment to product in an organization, coupled with the use of disruptive technology like AI, will, I mean, potentially could do amazing things. Obviously, you have to pick the right products. That's a choice thing, and you've got to make some decisions about where value lies. But if you do those two things, I think the sky's the limit, really. So I completely agree.
So to use your printing press analogy, it is as hard now as it was then to write a valuable, wise book because it starts with having something to share. And you back then you used probably Quail pen and stuff like that. And right now you can use OpenAI to draft it with you and polish your language. But still, you have to have some idea what you want to. You have to have something to say, basically, right? Because otherwise, it will be low quality. So what the printing press changed is that it's much easier to then bring it to the users of books or to the readers, and ebooks make that even easier right now. So going back to the core problem will always remain as long as we are in a limited reality, is that you cannot do everything and you have to concentrate your efforts in order. I mean, the question is, what do you want? Do you want to prolong the existence of your organization as it is now, or do you want spectacular results? And I'm kind of quoting this spectacular results is something that one board member demanded from his people, and I think it's a fair demand. I mean, you are doing this extraordinary change. You have those motivated teams. Where are the results? And it's a fair question. However, spectacular results come from concentration and focus, and it has been so always. And I don't think any kind of technology can ever change that.
No.
So, so this is the. I mean, and I want to underline that the APOM is something more than that. Because we have been working on that and discussing amongst the PSTs that are working on this model. So there are still those problems: how to manage products, how to organize cross-product work, etc. But from maybe that's my main interest. That's why I'm so focused on this. It's okay, but how do you first get the company's management to actually realign much of their resources around certain specific products in a product portfolio that it's not too large for the resources to be spread too thin to make any difference.
And that is I want to say $64,000 question. I guess when that saying came out, $64,000 was a lot of money. Now it's not maybe as much, but that is the fundamental question. And from what I've observed, the best way of doing that is to start doing it, and start with one product, and
Exactly.
then incrementally add another, and then another, and start doing that. The message of this is the other thing that agile transformations, I think, got wrong, and this is going to sound very grandiose, and please shoot me down, Andy, if I'm sounding like I'm preaching here, is that they assumed, one, that the implementation of agility would be done in a very sequential waterfall way. The other thing is they assumed that all teams would be agile, but they would all kind of do it the same way. They would have the same underlying agile operating model. And I don't believe that. And what I've observed is different products require different cultures, they require different organizational models, they require different incentives, now they might not be drastically different from the other products, but the ability to own. I always thought there was an irony when we said that the people that own the Scrum process that you implement, because it's a framework, are the teams, but we're going to tell you how to do it. And I thought there was some irony in these agile transformations telling people to become agile, because of the ownership. Whereas I do believe if you can empower the product teams and the leadership around the product to take ownership of how they work, how they're incentivized, how they're aligned, what the the roadmap, the technology roadmap, the business roadmap, the operational roadmap, the value model. They take ownership of those things. I think I honestly, you talk about spectacular results. From my experience, having done a few startups, the most spectacular results we ever achieve is when everybody's aligned and owns the things that they're working on. And and obviously AI and other technology can really drive that. So I guess to answer your question, even though I'm meant to be asking the questions, I guess start one product at a time. So what we've listeners,
So this is interesting because when you talk to companies, when you talked about what were their experiences, quite a few companies have an experience of this kind that for some reason, usually that was CEO's pet project or something like that, they did really set these things up right. So they set aside a team and gave that team a product and let that team run with it, and quite often that ended in a success, larger or smaller, depending on how big the market opportunity were and other factors. However, it kind of worked. What is interesting is that most often no one had the idea, okay, let's repeat that with 3 products or maybe with 5 products next time, right? So I know at least one such project that ended and this team being spun off as a separate company, which is an okay business decision, but why not to try and repeat that again, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times. It's like when I used to go into organizations and I said, how long does it take you to deliver software? And they said, oh, 12 weeks. And I said, so when you have a production failure, your products are out for 12 weeks? Oh, no, we can deliver in minutes if there's a production problem. So you can deliver software in 12 minutes or whatever they say. Oh, yes, but normally we don't. I was like, well, how do we make the norm the opposite? you know and there was like, well, we can't do that. Why? Well, because we're obviously using the best people. So you're saying the other people aren't the best. How do we make them the best? Well, no. Well, we create an environment around them where they can make choices and make decisions. You're telling me you don't do that for your norm? Well, we could do that. And it's just always interesting as you unpack the organizational bureaucracy that has evolved for good reason to make but at the end of the day, it's about choices, and it's about trust, and it's about support. And you get those three things in place, which I think are fundamentals to APOM, to the Agile Product Operating Model, using evidence to make those choices, using evidence to provide the support, and fix the problems, and make those right choices. I think that at the end of the day, you can do amazing things. So our listeners, we have to keep this short, and I could talk to you, Andy, as we've proven, many very late nights for you. we have burnt the oil talking about this stuff. our listeners, maybe at many different levels in an organization, maybe some of them are practitioners working in agile teams that have been through an agile transformation. Maybe we've got some leaders listening. What would be the advice for them about APOM and to leverage this agile transformation and to really take it to the next level? What can they do next?
Yeah, I would say start with the first product. So define a product, and this can be hard in its own right, because by a well-defined product, it also has technological implications, which means creating a product that has as few hard dependencies as possible, and give that product to a team or a group of teams, a formation as we call it, with a product owner, and let them run with generic or general business goals like a certain number of users, conversions, revenue, whatever, and see how that plays out. And obviously choose a product that makes sense, right? So a product that really would appeal to your customer base, etc. And see how that plays out. If you can get, because it's much easier to get your executives, whoever has the power to give green light to an experiment like that, and keep that green light on for long enough period for that to bear any fruit. um, it's much easier to get such a commitment for one product than for creating a product portfolio of 40 products. And 40 it's way too many, but like
Yeah.
20 products, and having quarterly reviews of those product portfolios, etc. It's much easier to get a commitment for one product for, I don't know, a year, and then proving that this can work. And what is important, that it can work here, not somewhere else in another company, somewhere else in another country, not here. That's an important proof. And that, by the way, this is how agile transformations got started, is that somewhere some people established a few Scrum or Agile teams, and they started to be in some aspects better than the rest, and it got someone's attention. That's how it got started, before we had all the marketing going, before the large consulting companies started talking about that to clients, etc. Before that, it started like this. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Start with a product, and it's a natural, not just to re-echo the white paper, it's a natural evolution of your agile approach. It
Definitely.
really is. What you're doing is you're basically changing the focus of the team from a work backlog into a product backlog, and really bring in the business, the people that are ultimately stakeholders of this product, closer to that, and empowering some sort of product owner, product manager to drive this product into the market and to deliver the results. Might be an internal product, might be an external product, but deliver the results that the vision and the dream and the plan are aspiring to. But I think everybody has that ability to make this change, and that's the other great thing about APOM, right? Is that agile transformations, particularly at scale, were like these huge things. What we're actually saying is get a team, or maybe a couple of teams if it's a slightly bigger product. Focus them on it. Get a roadmap. Get a business map. Get a ROI. Build those OKRs or those goals, and then form that, and then focus it on the problem at hand, and let them go, and
Yeah,
then review it continuously and see how it goes.
right. And if it's a new product, I would highly recommend to start with one team and then many.
Oh yes, so would I. There is a fallacy, or a sort of, if you the idea that if you throw 100 people at a problem, you get it 10 times faster than 10 people.
Oh,
No.
it's worse. It's worse than that, because those people have to do something. So if there is not enough work coming from the product owner. They will invent their own work, which will basically mean developing something according to their vision of how the product will evolve in the future, which usually ends up in all that having to be reworked or holding the teams back in the future. So it's so much better to start with one team if you are starting
Small,
with a new product.
small is definitely the way to go. It is true that having lots of teams from day one, particularly on a new product, is a recipe for disaster usually, unless there are actually multiple products and there's a clearly understood separation between them, which is really really good. Andy, thank you for spending the time today. I've really enjoyed listening to your experiences around the Agile Product Operating Model and talking about your white paper, Moving Beyond Agile Transformations, Leveraging the Agile Product Operating Model.
Thanks. Thanks for having me for this discussion in the Scrum.org podcast. It's a first for me, so
Oh,
interesting
well, that's always
experience.
that's always good. That's always good. I'm glad finally we managed to get you on. And listeners, thank you for listening today to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. Today we're listening to Andy Brandt, PST and organizational change expert, talk about his motivations in writing the paper Moving Beyond the Agile Transformations, Leveraging the Agile Product Operating Model. Hopefully it's been as enjoyable for you listening as it has been for me participating. I think the one message that came out was this is a great way of really taking those agile transformations and the benefits you've got and aligning it to the problems of the future and to the outcomes that the company seeks, the strategies driving to, and really letting it go. And AI is just going to increase that leverage that you can deliver the value from. So I think that was a great message from today's podcast. And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to some more. I'm very lucky to have a variety of guests that talk about everything in the areas of professional Scrum, product thinking, and of course, Agile. Thanks, everybody, and Scrum on.